Okay, we're here with Bronx. Bronx is in, basically the garage has been converted, and you're going to see in a second, in kind of a play area. It's kind of funny because Bronx is a really big dog, and it's got a play gate that's really small that you can almost walk over, but it keeps him in there. Even if it falls over, he stays in that area. Now, this is basically a video we're going to go over tips that you can use if you have a dog that has a resource guarding issue. Now, as bizarre as this sounds, resource guarding is not considered aggressive behavior because you typically, once the resource is removed, the behavior stops immediately. Now, it's very natural for a dog to guard resources in the wild because that's food usually, and it's survival or a place of shelter, and those are things they need. A dog can guard, usually it's a high value item like a bone or a food item. They can also guard a location, and they can also guard a person. And the technique for all three of these is the same. It is not any indication of how well trained the dog is or anything else. All kinds of dogs get a resource guarding problem. Now, the more that you take it away from the dog, the worse you will make it. Now, he's been a couple people who have tried to take things from him, which is why we went over the drop early in the session. And so we want to focus on that drop as much as we can so he gets that he's used to dropping things for us. Now, typically when a dog resource guards, one of the first things they do is they kind of freeze and get stiff. And I'm staring at the camera, but I'm looking here, and this is dogs do this as a warning. Also, if a dog starts moving very slow, that can be indecisive or a warning. Now, the warning signs we're looking for are the dog freezes and gets tense, the eyes get really wide, they start baring their teeth or licking their lips, they're yawning, they're getting stiff, their hackles go up, they breathe really very heavily, or they freeze breathing, they lunge at you and things along those lines. Now, the key when it comes to resource guarding this technique, and this is a technique I got out of a book called Mine, M-I-N-E with an exclamation point, is to teach the dog that when a human approaches you, they're not interested in your resource. Matter of fact, when they approach you, they're going to give you better stuff than what you already have and show no interest in your resource. The dog is happy and no longer thinks it needs to guard it from you because you're not trying to take their stuff. And that's why we really want to practice the drop as much as we can. When the dog's in the resource guarding, you're probably not going to be able to get them to drop initially, but eventually we'd like to get to that point. So what we're going to do is I'm going to approach. Let's say that I'm approaching Bronx and I get to 15 feet, and at 15 feet he stops and he starts staring at me. That's his warning. He's saying, hey buddy, one step closer and it's on. So the key is to identify what that distance is. This is going to be a little bit awkward spacing in here, so we'll see what we can do to film it so you can watch it. For you guys, you won't need to do it. But the idea is you want to have a problem because you won't be filming it. But you don't want to, the idea is to approach it from all sorts of different angles. What I'm going to do is I'm going to approach. When he gets to that point where he freezes, then I know that that's close to his breaking point. The whole point of this is you have to keep him from reacting. If he reacted, you push too far, too fast. So let's say we're approaching when I get to 12 feet, that's when he freezes. Well, I take note of that distance and I leave the room and I wait for it, let him relax a second, and then I come back in, but I stop at 13 feet, 1 foot beyond that zone. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to toss a treat into his little confinement area, then I'm going to leave the area. And then I'm going to come back and do it again. Now, I'm going to be going probably in and out this door over and over again, but when you're doing it, first you approach from this angle, then from this angle, then from that angle, and the idea is you have to move farther away than that distance where he's going to feel the need to guard, and then approach from all sorts of different angles. Now, once you can get to the point where you come to 12 feet and toss that treat and he's not stiff, he's not giving any of his warning signs, next time you go to 11 feet and then practice approaching all those different angles at 11 feet and grab the 10, 9, 8, and eventually it gets to the point where you're pretty much right there and give him the treat, and you're getting closer and closer progressively, and he's saying, hey, he's repeatedly approached me. He's not once tried to take my area or knock my gate down, or the kennel is really, from talking to the guardians off camera, when the kennel door is worse, that's really bad. That's where he probably has the worst case of it. We're not going to do it there. He might not participate here. I think he will, but dogs and kids, you never know what they're going to do when you start filming them. But if he does get like that, I mean, if closing the kennel door is one of those things, we want to not avoid it. We want to practice that. So put him in there and then basically approach, and when it stop at that distance, toss the treat, and once it goes in his kennel, turn and walk away, leave the room completely. And keep on doing this until you can walk all the way up to him, drop the treat in, and he no longer perceives it to be a negative. All right, so we're going to do a little interesting camera work as I go in there. And the guardian, I'm going to have him basically, let me go in there first, and you're probably stand over there so you have an angle so you can see the dog and me. All right, so let's go ahead and see how Bronx does for this. Oh, he's in his kennel, and he just stopped breathing. All right, go ahead and come right over here. Can you see him?
Yeah.
Okay. See how you could hear how he was breathing. and then he stopped. Whoops. There we go. There we go. He actually batted out of the water bowl. I've never seen a dog do that before. Now, I threw a couple because I had bad tosses. Now, he was in the kennel, and he was, like I say, he's breathing really heavy, and he just stopped, and he stared. So that's the warning for him. So now he's not doing it, so now I'm going to leave and just stay right there. So I'm leaving the area, and Bronx is just kind of hanging out, and just keep filming him. Is he just staying in the same area, or has he moved away?
Same area.
Okay. So I'm going to approach again. And he actually can catch. But I walk away. He doesn't have to necessarily catch it. And you just want to give him like a little mini break in between each toss so he can kind of reset himself. I'm using that line of that extension cord on the floor as kind of my line to begin with. Just use whatever markers are appropriate. Of course, he's not doing it, which happens. Oh, here you go. They're falling out of the area. Okay, so basically, as you can tell, he's not doing it now, but he was giving the indicators, and this tells me this might be a lower case. It also tells me the exercise might have helped as well. And so but again, it cracks me up because he could probably jump over this pretty easily, but it's in the mind. So the idea for this is, again, approach from all sorts of different angles. We have a door over here, and the garage door is there. You might want to open the garage. I don't know if it changes if the garage door is open. Sometimes changes the environment, changes, and the dog isn't guarding. But you want to, let's see if you can maybe go in the kennel then. There you go. Bronx, sit. Bronx, sit. 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 Now see what he's doing there? That's not resource guarding, but that's similar to what he'll do. Sit. Now, because these are bouncing out, you might want to put plexiglass or something in the kennel so when you throw it in the kennel, it doesn't bounce out because it'll just cause more frustration. But basically, you just want to keep on approaching him and take note of how close you get until eventually you get right up here and he's comfortable and content. And then eventually take this thing down and do it with him just in the kennel. So he gets used to it. Again, when a human approaches me, they're not here to take my stuff, they're going to make my situation better. All right, well, this is Bronx, and these are tips and tricks you can use if you have a dog that has a resource guarding problem.